Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is Wednesday, November 5th, 2025, and food is getting more expensive. I have a story, although I can't remember where I put it. The chicken is supposed to get 25% more expensive, and that's over the next couple of months, and that's because of bird flu and things like that, and them having to kill off all of the flocks if bird flu is found on a farm, and so the supply is not meeting demand, and when that happens, price increase. Remember, like the housing market, right? So chicken is going to be just like that. And cloned meat. Thank you for sending in. Somebody commented on Canada Poly yesterday saying cloned meat is the meat without the animal. No ranching needed. You just have the cloned meat. And I thought, oh my gosh. Right, there we go. That's what I was missing. So it removes the quote ethical concerns of farming. It is not a very. I think it's a terrible idea. I think that Kentucky Fried Chicken does that, right? Don't they make chickens with something like smaller bones or something like that? There's some rumor going around that KFC engineers their chickens, and they have so many chickens that they have influence in the chicken market, and they want a specific kind of chicken and whatever. So I don't want clone meat, and I don't want printed meat. Have you seen the printed meat? I don't want printed meat either. So, but apparently the cloned meat without the animal, according to the person who emailed, which I appreciate because that gives me insight that I didn't have before. And I'm going to research it a little bit more, but yeah, that makes sense. I don't want the printed meat. I don't want the clone meat, but Canada is saying, oh yeah, sure, no problems. Rigged U.S. elections. So Mamdini got in. The Somalian guy got in. I think the Somalian guy got in. I've got tabs about it. And there's all sorts of other things going on with rigged elections. And it's way worse than I thought. Way worse than I ever would have believed in 2018. Way worse, I think. Way worse. Crazy UPS plane crash. I've got wild footage of that at the end of the show today. And what else? Chinese tourists. Anita Anand is announcing Chinese tourists in Canada because our relationship with China is just top notch, right? The two Michaels, what two Michaels? Everything's good. They've got Chinese girlfriends now. Everything's fine, right? Everybody loves China, and China's coming to enjoy and build our beautiful country, she says. I am not even kidding with you. CPC floor crosser. And man, we've got to talk about this stinker of a budget details and the political impact and the fallout, and everybody and their dog are talking about how much of a stinker this budget is. The NDP are going to pass it. I think they're going to pass it. They came out to say, it's not going to be the NDP. It's going to be more complicated than that. They've got a floor crosser. Yesterday, 2 days ago, or whenever they passed the C3, the vote was 170 to 163. And I guess there were some people absent or whatever, because I think that it's got to be 174 for a majority. But anyway, 170 to 163 was the vote, and that passed Bill C3. And I feel like the Liberals are one vote away naturally. They were at 168, and I think that there's a CPC member who's already crossed the floor. He's been expelled from the Conservative caucus, so he's no longer CPC, and the Liberals want him, and they want him because they want to pass their budget. And all they really need is one, maybe two or three NDP to muck things up, to not vote, to abstain, whatever it is, changes the math, and all of a sudden Liberals win, right? Liberals get their natural majority. And so it's a natural majority. So it is one of those things where it's not going to be as clean cut as the NDP supported the Liberals. It's going to be, this person crossed the floor and this person abstained. And so bingo, bango, bongo, we've got this thing and nobody's really to blame, but it's engineered this way, right? Like it is engineered this way. So who's to blame? Why do we continue to allow people who don't have Canadians' best interests at heart? You can't spend your way out of debt. You cannot spend your way out of debt, and that is what we are trying to do. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, Victoria says, give back what your party stole from us, our future, our spirit, and our hope. If Liberals have done such a good job and everything is so great, why are Liberal MPs and Carney promising and scrambling to fix everything? So there's a lot of promise of, fixing things and unleashing things and blah, 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 blah. These people have been in charge for 10 years. They're bad liars, and yet they keep control of the levers of power. National Post says, John Robson's article says, Mark Carney's deficit exploding budget is elbows up, IQs down. Greg says a so-called world-renowned economist can't produce a balanced budget. Good thing he was installed as our prime minister. Yeah, right? I mean, for real. It's incredible. Nobody's questioning it. Here's Champagne and Blacklock's reporter says the finance minister confirms the deficit is 192% higher than originally forecast, but advises taxpayers to sleep well tonight. People will go to bed and say, we're going to be okay. Yeah, because there's a path. We could go to Ohio. I've been looking at jobs in Ohio and the property's pretty cheap. We're going to be okay. We're going to be just fine. Think of the opportunities for the kids that wouldn't be here in Canada in Ohio, right? Or replace Ohio with any state that you might think of, because staying here is crazy. Being in the States too is pretty crazy. Dearborn, Michigan's bonkers. And there's New York. Well, that's a write-off, right? My gosh. And Biden was a nightmare for the last 4 years as well. So it's not a dead cert. I'm not saying running away is the best idea, but I don't see any other way people could go to bed at night and think to themselves, Canada's going to be okay. No, man. If chicken increases by 20 to 25%, Canada is not going to be okay. They don't want us eating beef or chicken. You can have pasta with a side of pasta, right? And maybe some carrots if we're lucky. Ridiculous. Here is Matt Strauss, and he is talking about this budget, this nonsense budget. I hope I'm wrong, but I think they're going to pass it. I mean, I've already made the case. I think it's already passed. I think it's already a done deal. Here we go.
Hi, this is Matt Strauss, the Conservative Member of Parliament for Kitchener South Hespeler.
Oh, no.
I just came out of a 1 hour long speech from the Finance Minister. It was mostly platitudes, and what matters is the top line.
Yeah, I'm working on it.
It's $80 billion of new debt just this year. It's the biggest deficit in Canada's history outside of the pandemic. Everything I know about economics is that government spending money they don't have is what drives inflation. Inflation is what's making life unaffordable for people in Kitchener South Hespeler, and we got to stop it. So as Conservatives, we're going to do everything in our power to prevent the government from blowing the bank on their platitudes and their nonsense promises, and our work starts now, so stay tuned. Hi, this is Matt Strauss.
Usually, it's very frustrating when my sound card is acting up, I guess, and it's all out of sync. And I hope my words don't look out of sync on the recording or anything like that. I hope they're not out of sync on the live stream. But it's just frustrating for me when this happens. So apologies about that. I usually try and fix it, but it just started just before I was recording. I was watching video and it was fine. So it's frustrating that it's just decided to start that now. Anyway, Pierre Poilievre says Mark Carney nearly doubled Trudeau's deficit and kept Liberal taxes on groceries, work, energy, and home building. Conservatives will continue fighting for affordable lives for Canadians. I don't know, kind of weak, right? Kind of weak. Here is Robin Baber, and he says Mark Carney's 25-26 budget, $78.3 billion deficit. Carney pretends $40 billion of that is capital investments, $1.3 trillion in debt, $55.6 billion in interest payments. My heart breaks for Canadians, especially for young Canadians. So we'll watch a little bit of this. It's 1:35. Sorry that it's out of sync again. I can't do anything about it because I tried and it just skips the audio. So here we go.
$78.3 billion is Mark Carney's projected deficit for 2025-2026. This is Roman Baber, Conservative Member of Parliament from York Centre, City Conservative. I'm just reading the budget. I just finished listening to the budget presentation and Pierre's reply, which was excellent. The Conservatives will not be supporting this budget. It's not an affordable budget. Today's deficits are tomorrow's taxes, and today's deficits is tomorrow's inflation. And adding $78 billion will also add to a debt of $1.347 trillion before the end of the spending fiscal year. And it's also important to note that our interest charges for this year will be over $55 billion, which is more than Canada collects in GST. Imagine everything we pay in federal excise tax will go to service our debt. And finally, one other thing to point is Mark Carney is going to attempt to say that $40 billion out of this projected deficit is investments. He's allocating this deficit. He's dividing it to say that $40 billion is investments. Nonsense. We borrow it, we pay interest on it, and we're not going to see revenues from it. This is a disaster, Liberal budget. Future generations will be paying this money off forever. We desperately need a conservative government to come and fix this country's books. I'm Roman Baber. Speak again. 78.
So, well, we need something different. That's for darn sure, right? Like what's happening is absolutely not sustainable. And yet they say, the only thing we can do is bring in more immigrants, raise taxes, and spend more money that we don't have, because that's exactly what they're doing. Wealth Moose says the budget number nobody noticed. The Canadian budget looks fine at first glance. It does not look fine. A $78 billion deficit is not like ho hum. It doesn't look fine. Anyway, a $78 billion deficit and promise to cut spending, which does not come to fruition at any time in the next couple of years or anything like that, which is interesting. But buried in the fine print is a number that changes everything. Ottawa says it will invest $280 billion in new projects over 5 years, but on a cash basis, the real money we borrow, that's actually $450 billion. That's a $170 billion gap that quietly raises our future debt. The trick, the government counts projects over decades, not when the cash goes out. So the official deficit looks smaller, even though we'll have to borrow the full amount soon. What it means, taxpayers will be paying more interest every year. Debt charges are already set to rise from $55 billion to $76 billion by 2030, more than Ottawa spends on health transfers. So when interest costs eat the budget, something gives, either higher taxes, fewer public services, or more borrowing, and that means inflation later, right? And the new capital spending push sounds visionary. It does not sound visionary. It sounds like people who are trying to come up with a story that we'll believe. And I hope desperately that people reject this. But the NDP sound convinced, and we already have one floor crosser. So one seat or one abstention, and things change. So anyway, roads, defense, green tech, AI. They want to invest in AI. Right, sure. $1 billion in AI. Ugh. But it locks in future bills that today's students and newcomers will pay, right? If you're planning to study, work, or settle in Canada, watch what's not said. Your taxes, rents, and job prospects are all dependent on how this quiet $170 billion of borrowing gap plays out. In short, the story isn't the $78 billion deficit, it's the $450 billion cash drain hiding behind it. That's the number that will shape Canada's next decade and economic destruction, I guess. Here is Chris, and she says the budget deficit, $78.3 billion, and an ocean of red ink. It's worse than even the PBO was warning. I had misread it at first, thinking it was less bad than predicted, but it's worse. I just about cried on air. And it says 78 billion, 65 billion, 63 billion, 57 billion, 56 billion. In 2024-25, the deficit was 48 billion. So this budget is incredibly irresponsible, and that's putting it really, really nicely, right? Here are these CBC stooges to talk about this as well. It's probably going to be out of sync. We're going to listen to a minute. Here we go.
Yeah, here it is. It's called Canada Strong, Budget 2025. You can see all the tabs I've made. There's a lot in this, Rosie, including a big jump in the deficit. Let's start by walking through the numbers. The big number is the deficit this year. It is $78.3 billion. Now, that's not the $100 billion some people projected, but that's a heck of a lot higher than people are used to seeing in a non-COVID year, and it stays at an elevated rate in all the years after this, going out until 2030. You can see the $78.3 billion this year. It's going to be $65.4 billion next year, $63.5 billion the year after that, just shy of $58 billion and just shy of $57 billion by 2029, 2030. Broadly, Rosie, this year and the next couple of years, the deficit is twice as high as we would have seen in the fall economic statement that Chrystia Freeland tabled in December, and growth is half of what was projected just 9-10 months ago. Now, you're at that.
Growth is half. Non-COVID year. Non-COVID year. So in a COVID year, you can spend money you don't have, but in a non-COVID year, that's bad. What? Any year, regardless of whether you're sick or you say you're sick or not, it is a bad idea to spend money you don't have. If you don't have money, going out and spending thousands and thousands of dollars on quote investments is a bad idea. This Bitcoin is definitely going to return money. This race ticket is definitely going to return money. It's an investment. It's not a pie in the sky thing. Definitely, for sure. It's an investment. These EV batteries are an investment. okay? And they are definitely going to return lots and lots of money. We're going to put billions of dollars on this one, billions of dollars on red EV batteries, right? It came up black, sir. Are you kidding me right now? You kidding me? So here we are, right? It's come up black and we're holding the bag and we've got debts to pay back all that borrowing that we've just put on red, and it came up black. Here is Northern Perspective, and they're highlighting Michael Chong's takedown of the fiscal anchors, which were supposed to constrain spending like this, but haven't. And it used to be 1% of GDP, and now it is 2% of GDP, and that's a big difference. And can we maintain that? No, absolutely not. And so when will sanity return? When we come to terms with what has actually happened to our country, which is Canadian citizens are no longer in charge and haven't been for a long time.
Mr. Speaker, the last budget of 2 years ago had a fiscal anchor of a deficit of less than 1% of GDP in future years and constantly declining debt to GDP ratios in subsequent years. This budget has a fiscal anchor of deficits averaging 2% of GDP over the next number of years and a rising debt to GDP ratio. Will the Finance Minister confirm that his fiscal anchor is weaker than the last Finance Minister's fiscal anchor?
Mr. Speaker, I have a lot of respect for my colleague, but he might have noticed that the world has changed, Mr. Speaker, and this is a new government.
The world has changed, and this is a new government, he says. So our fiscal anchors are different than Chrystia Freeland and Justin Trudeau's, and worse. They've worsened by double, right? It was 1%, now it's 2%. Unbelievable that Justin, a drama teacher and a news reporter, did better than, the world's smartest financier and Champagne, whatever his credentials are. I don't actually know what his credentials are. Arthur says, folks, after going without a budget for 19 months, we got the doozy of all blowout spending or investment budgets. Investment, right? No, don't call it spending, Martha. We are investing in this property, and it is oceanfront in Florida. I remember there was a Al Bundy episode, Married with Children episode, about like swampland scams, and you'd buy this property and it was investment, and really the person who would make money is the person who sold you the property, and the property's like valueless. It didn't have any value other than the value you assigned it in your head because this person's talked it up so much. And so like investment, but it's not an investment. It feels like a scam, and it kind of is a scam, right? We're all being scammed, I think. $78 billion deficit is certainly a scam. This year, with deficits as far as the eye can see, Carney's old stomping ground, Brookfield Renewable, is up 26% in October and 62% year to date. Man, wish I had bought into that, right? Darn, shucks, right? Missed the boat, almost as if someone knew. Yeah, well, I didn't know. I mean, you could have assumed. I think some friends of mine bought into Brookfield, and I just didn't. Anyway, Martin said the LPC federal government is playing games with Canadians. In the budget report, they cite that Canada has the lowest net debt to GDP ratio in the G7, and that 13.3%, according to the IMF October 25 fiscal monitor. But that CPP and QPP assets are not available to the federal government to service its debt. These funds are earmarked for future pension obligations and managed independently. Including them in net debt calculations assumes they could be liquidated to pay off government liabilities, an assumption that doesn't hold in practice without jeopardizing retirees' benefits. This leads to a distorted picture when comparing Canada's debt to other countries. For example, when measured by gross debt, which includes all liabilities without subtracting financial assets, Canada ranks 5th highest and in the G7 and 7th worst among 32 advanced economies. So there are worse, but we're not so good. And another problem is that our provinces hold debt. There's one taxpayer, right? You and me, the citizen, is the taxpayer. So if we pay governments at different levels, they're all bilking off a single taxpayer. There's only so much money that goes around, right? And so if you've got municipal taxes, and you do, property taxes, and then provincial taxes, and you do, and then federal taxes too, then there's a breaking point at some point. And the provincial debt is held separately than the federal debt, as far as I understand it. So PEI's debt is not laced on, or is not put on me, but it actually kind of is. If you calculate the whole country with the provincial debt included, then our debt to GDP ratio looks really bad. And again, there's only one taxpayer, right? So like, if you actually look at all of the debt, it's really bad. But if you compartmentalize the debt and say, well, the PEI guy's provincial debt's not my debt, so screw all that. I don't have to worry about that. I just have to worry about Ontario's debt and the federal debt. So I'm good. But really, even if you add Ontario's debt and the federal debt, screwed. We're totally screwed. And I mean, it's billions, right? And then the federal debt and the deficit, screwed. We're screwed. And it doesn't seem like anybody really cares, or the economists have found a way around that, and we just haven't caught up. And maybe all of this economic turmoil is the market catching up to all the shenanigans that people have been doing to bilk it and get rich and things like that on the taxpayers' back, et cetera. And this is the payback. And now they're trying to figure out how not to crash the economy. But $78 billion. Yeah, step one, let's spend ourselves out of this one. Great plan, genius. Brush your teeth. Alberta's secession says, scrolling just this morning, estimated deficit $70 to $100 billion. Yeah, birthright citizenship passed the other day. Yep. Thanks, NDP. Chinese group tourism approved. We'll get there in a minute. U.S. says Canada is overrun by China. Yup, about to be more overrun. BC's First Nations clarifies that they demand land title. We'll get there in a minute. Remembrance stamps issued featuring Sikh soldier. We'll get there in a minute. Cloned meat without labels. Yep, approved. That was yesterday. Canadian dollar breaks below 71 cents. Price of chicken is skyrocketing. Can't hardly wait for tomorrow. Right? Like crying with Mark starts Friday. Maxime Bernier is responding to the budget. Budget 25, $188 million more for mainstream media. Don't tell me we have independent mainstream media in Canada. The mainstream media will remain the government's propaganda arm. Yep. And they'll silence the internet while not having any kind of laws in place to do so, and then retroactively pass the laws and get away with it, because that's how this all works, really. Even if you get somebody like Trump into office, that's how this all works. Maxime Bernier continues. He says the federal budget, more spending and more borrowing, $78 billion deficit, no balanced budget. And after 5 years, the Liberals will have added $321 billion to our national debt. Annual interest payments amount to $55 billion, which represents the entire transfer of healthcare funding to the provinces. All the money we pay in GST goes towards paying the interest on our debt. It's an inflationary and irresponsible budget. It is. Yep, it is. Maxime Bernier again, 2025 budget, 33,000 temporary foreign workers. You notice that, or me? Just me. Okay. Who don't want to leave the country will have a nice gift for not respecting our laws, the permanent residency. That's outrageous. All of them must be deported. So they're getting amnesty, and Cosman is putting a finer point on it. This is insane. Liberal Prime Minister Carney quietly announced a $120 million amnesty for refugees and asylum claimants in Canada over the next 2 years. There are nearly 500,000 asylum claimants in Canada right now as of 2025. So that's pretty crazy, right? And so here's the line. Budget 25 proposes a one-time initiative to recognize eligible protected persons in Canada as permanent residents over the next 2 years. So expensive, very, very costly. Mario says, important. If I'm older and white and work for the federal government, I'm crapping my pants for the next several years. DEI and discrimination is officially a part of the budget. So comprehensive expenditure review. And it says, the government understands that transitions can be difficult and is committed to minimizing hardships for federal employees while also protecting diversity in the public service workforce and ensuring a strong younger generation of public servants. Yikes. So DEI is baked in, and maybe only one demographic is losing the job, right? What's the demographics of the federal government right now? Mark Nixon says, budget review, Canada's economy grew 0.2% in the first half of 25. Unemployment hit 7.1%. The budget quietly admits growth will barely top 1% for the next 2 years. Trade tariffs up, investment down, productivity flat. They call it a plan for prosperity. It's really a plan for stagnation. Yes. Yep. Here's the NDP, and they say, we're not going to definitely vote for this, but we're not going to not create the circumstances for it to pass. And creating the circumstances for it to pass is abstaining, changing the math of everything, changing the limit necessary for a majority, and changing, right, like if it's the NDP abstaining and not the Liberals abstaining, the Liberals gain seats as the NDP abstain. So he explains how this all works. Again, sorry that it's out of sync. We're going to have to say goodbye to the stream soon as well. We're halfway through the budget stuff, I guess. I'll probably finish the budget stuff because it's an important topic, and I feel like we should do that. So here's the NDP. And again, sorry it's not synced up.
Well, today we have the first budget at the federal level in 18 months, and I want to contextualize it a little bit. Canadians are facing serious economic pressures from coast to coast to coast. So I'll tell you a few things that we like about the budget. There's $51 billion in infrastructure spending, and that's linked to unionized jobs. On the negative side, you have 40,000 public sector job cuts. And when you have a jobs crisis, cutting union, family-sustaining, good jobs is the opposite direction of where we want to go. And so you see there's positive and negatives in this budget, and we're going to take a comprehensive look and weigh it out in the aggregate.
Are you telegraphing you guys are going to vote for this budget or just be absent on budget vote day?
No, we're just more rational maybe than the other parties are. You know, we're not telegraphing anything. And we want to give this budget the serious once-over that it deserves. And we want to consult with Canadians.
Maintaining that abstention would be an option. It would be authorized for NDP MPs to abstain during that vote, or following the lines of the party would be to cast a vote.
Yeah, well, so the tradition in our party is that we caucus together and we vote as one unit on confidence measures. But it's also part of our tradition history that sometimes members, for various reasons, can't vote the way that the caucus wants. So instead of voting opposite of caucus, they are permitted, with whip's approval, to abstain from the vote. So that's also a possibility.
To abstain from the vote. Interesting, right? We're just not going to do that. Brett says the managing director of the International Monetary Fund says Canadians must take on more debt even though Canadians don't want to. So what do the Liberals propose in their budget? More debt. Such crap. And then it's just champagne talking about that. So we're going to skip it because the videos are being weird. National Post says Carney's budget reveals $925 billion, million dollars, almost $1 billion, to support sovereign public AI infrastructure. Sovereign public AI infrastructure. Will it know what a woman is? Because I bet you it won't. Will it, if you ask it, who inhabited Canada in the 1980s and 90s? What was the culture? What did it look like in Canada in the 1980s and 1990s? It will give you the wrong answer, I promise you. So anyway, Mickey says, says Scoop, Nova Scotia MP Chris D'Entremont says he is considering crossing the floor to join the Liberal Party. He tells me he'll make a decision in the next few days after reviewing the federal budget. Other Conservatives are also being courted. And so CPC crossing the floor is a big get. Howard says, imagine being a Conservative MP looking at a Liberal budget with an eye-watering $80 billion deficit and a $370 billion new deficit spending over the next 5 years and thinking, yeah, screw my voters. I want me some of that. Yeah. That's what this, quote, Conservative MP did. Canada Proud says Chris D'Entremont has been expelled from the Conservative Party caucus after publicly floating crossing the floor to the Liberals. Shocking, right? Absolutely shocking. Monica says people are elected to represent the platform, position, and party they ran under. Want to change party? Call a by-election. Want to abstain from voting on a major issue of confidence? Step down. You were elected to vote. No point in taking the paycheck if you can't do the job. And there are a lot of people who will take the paycheck and the insider stock tips and all the rest and not do the job. And that's very common, I think. John Restad says, just reading about the budget, they're not going to scrap the industrial carbon tax, but they're changing it to set multi-decade industrial carbon pricing travesty that targets net zero by 2050. So they're rejigging in order to get to net zero. And that's not surprising, but it's not going to ever work, right? Like unless they pull out an alternate power source that is everywhere and easily set up by everybody, You're not going to replace oil and gas in the next few years. It's just not going to happen, right? Daniel Tyree is responding to Dominion Society. Dominion Society is responding to the budget, and they say included in today's budget were the updated immigration levels plans for 26 to 28. The Carney government is reducing the target from 395,000 down to 380,000 for the next 3 years. More dramatic cuts are being made to temporary migration workers and students, which is being reduced from 673,000 down to 385,000 in 26 and 370,000 in 27-28. And so that's interesting, but it's not enough. Daniel Tyree says 750,000 per year is still mass immigration. After a decade of Trudeau's radical policies, a much more significant adjustment is required than reducing the numbers a little bit. Canada needs remigration. So yes, I think that is true. And with that, we've got to say goodbye to the stream. There are a lot of crazy things going on. The budget is just one part of this wild and crazy story. But fundamentally, I've said it before, and I think that we are absolutely not in control of our government at this point in time, and they're using the apparatus of the state to continue to play money tricks and to justify further borrowing in a similar way that somebody who had kidnapped you and had a gun to your back would take you to the bank and say, like, take out all of the money in your whatever account that you've got, your TFSA, that $100,000 you've got stashed away, you're going to go take that out. And like, you comply because you don't really think that you have any other options, right? And like, that's how I feel like the country's being run. We've got a gun to our back, and they're saying, for your safety, Mr. Canadian Mark, you better go to the bank teller and you better not make any kind of noise, because if you do, I'm gonna pull this, and you're not gonna be around anymore to enjoy the fact that you don't have any money, right? Like, we're getting screwed, and there's nobody to call, right? There's nobody in that same way. Like, that bank teller can't help you. In fact, if you speak out, you're probably going to get her caught up in this whole mess too, right? So her, him, but one or the other. Anyway, that's enough out of me. Thanks for watching, everybody on the stream. For everybody else, we will carry on as soon as I kill the stream. If you want the whole show, head over to CanadaPoly.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm told I have to say that, and I'm really bad at that. And if not, that's okay. We'll catch you tomorrow. And for everybody else, we will carry on right meow. Right now. Table Salt says this is our grab bag of governance, but it's kind of small because the budget kind of eats it all up, right? Table Salt says, you're getting rid of race-based sentencing. She's responding to Mark Miller. Mark Miller says there can't be two types of Canadian citizens, according to the Globe and Mail, but of course we know that there are. And Table Salt says, you're getting rid of race-based sentencing, DEI hiring practices, refugee perks, and native status cards. Cool. Nope, that's not it. Here's Rebecca, and she says the Prime Minister's 60-day review of Guilbeault's electric vehicle sales mandate ends today. So there's lots of stuff happening, and with lots of stuff happening, not much makes the news headlines, and so stuff like this goes by the wayside, and we'll see